Now, political analyst Ross Feingold joining us from Taipei to share his latest observation from Asia regarding the ongoing trade wars. Ross, thank you so much for joining us here on A News once again. We have been talking about the trade wars ever since Trump started giving tariffs. So what would you say about Trump's tariffs shifting from a gradual approach in his first term to an immediate blanket strategy with 10% duties on China already in place? How might, do you think, this aggressive shift impact both U.S. consumers and global markets, considering the Tax Foundation estimates about 0.1% shrinkage in the U.S. economy by 2025 if these tariffs remain?
One thing that's very clear in the first couple of weeks of Trump 2.0 is, as you said, you used the word aggressive. He's going to move aggressively on matters of domestic policy as well as foreign policy, including on these trade issues. He's obviously willing to use trade as a pressure tactic against close trading partners, Mexico and Canada, and he has no qualms about doing that. And he also raised tariffs on China, which he did in his first term, but he's raised them another 10% within the first few weeks of his new term. And in some cases, this will probably prompt the trading partner to negotiate. We've seen that with Mexico and Canada. The threat of high tariffs really resulted in the leaders of those two countries calling President Trump and making offers. And President Trump said, fine, we'll talk some more. And he delayed the implementation of the tariffs. Now, when it comes to the economic impact, it's certainly too soon to tell. Obviously, Trump has delayed the implementation of the Canada and Mexico tariffs. So there's some relief there from companies and consumers. We'll see what happens with the China tariffs. That's certainly going to impact consumers, given how much made in China goods are exported to the United States every year.
Well, Trump's tariffs are targeting America's top three trading partners, as we have mentioned before, including Canada and Mexico, which together accounted for over $1.4 trillion in trade, which with the U.S. in 2023. How realistic is his expectation that these countries will negotiate on his terms rather than retaliate, given their own economic leverage and preparations for countermeasures?
Mexico and Canada want very much to have access to the U.S. market. It's crucial to their economies and to their manufacturing sectors across a wide range of goods. So clearly, at least based on what has transpired in recent days, those two leaders want to negotiate with Trump, and they were scared by the potential of 25% tariffs. And Trump has extracted something both from the leader of Mexico as well as from the leader of Canada. Canada is working at a bit of a disadvantage here. For starters, Trudeau and Trump do not have a good relationship. We saw that in Trump's first term. And secondly, Trudeau is on his way out as well. Canada is going into an election. So who the future leader of Canada is going to be is a question mark at the moment, although it does, according to polls, it does look like they're going to have a shift and the conservatives are going to take over the government after the upcoming election. On the other hand, in Mexico, we have a new president, but she has no relationship with Trump. And they're going to have to get to know each other and see if they're willing, if they're able to work together. That's also a question mark. So it's pretty interesting that amid the trade disputes, Trump's relationship with these two leaders are also somewhat in flux.
But Trump's statements about the tariffs are powerful, both economically and in getting everything else you want, he says, suggests he sees them as a bargaining tool beyond trade. Given past experiences with the tariffs in China and Europe, how effective is this strategy in achieving broader geopolitical objectives?
It's a really good question, and I think at the moment, the best we could say is time will tell. The threat of 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada did cause those two countries to negotiate. And it's very interesting how Trump mixed together various issues. With Canada, it was border security and fentanyl. And with Mexico, it was also border security, illegal migration, and fentanyl. So what the discussion or the motivation for the tariffs was not simply trade imbalances, but it was also other unrelated issues that Trump was seeking cooperation from Mexico and and Canada. And again, at the moment, the best we could say is it did work, or the threat of the tariffs did work, because both those countries did call President Trump and said, we're willing to negotiate, and we're willing to make some changes to our policies, whether that's on the United States northern border with Canada or the United States southern border with Mexico. We see both countries have committed to sending more troops, improving security on the border, and doing more, making more effort to stop the flow of fentanyl into the United States.
Well, Ross, the word aggression, as you have mentioned also, is something that is quite being used when we are talking about the Trump 2.0 for the trade policies. So do you think that his aggression is going to continue throughout his presidency, or are we going to see something else unfolding and him eventually, this situation dying down a little?
It certainly it appears to be that President Trump looks at trade imbalances and U.S. trade deficits with its major trading partners as a real crucial economic issue for the long-term health of the U.S. economy. We could disagree with him. We could say that it's not the serious issue that Trump makes it out to be, and it's good for U.S. consumers to have their choice of cheap goods made overseas. But Trump is very, very clear on this, and it doesn't matter if the counterparty is traditionally a close ally of the United States. When his attention turns to a trade imbalance with any country, no matter how close that country historically is to the United States, they're going to be a target for increased tariffs from the United States. And he's established that in the first couple of weeks. And I think that's basically going to be his trade policy going forward. So other allied countries, whether in the European Union or in this part of the world, countries like Japan and South Korea or Taiwan, where I'm speaking from, they're going to have to be prepared to be a target from Trump. He's not going to get to every country within his first few weeks. It might take a little time before he turns his attention to other trading partners. But as long as countries have a large trade imbalance with the United States, I think it's fair to say that they're going to be a point of concern for President Trump.
Well, let's consider the possibility of Trump's aggressive tariff policy continuing throughout his second term. As many analysts predict also, could this push countries like China, Canada and Mexico to permanently seek alternative trading partners, ultimately weakening the U.S.'s long-term trade position?
Certainly those countries will all look to diversify their trading partners. China has done that since the first Trump presidential term. They've expanded their presence in their trading relationships in places like the Middle East, Africa, and South America. But they can't easily replace the United States market. The United States market is really a crucial market for exports from Mexico, Canada, and China, and indeed from other trading partners of the United States as well. Nobody wants to lose access to the United States consumer. So all these countries are very eager to continue to trade with the United States.
Ross, in addition to all of this, I would like to ask your opinion about these trading policies turning into something diplomatic. Is it possible for this to eventually become effective in the names of diplomacy as well? Because the more that Canada stops being a partner in trade, the more that it is possible for Canada to maybe turn its back to United States in certain circumstances, and so on and so forth. It can happen with Mexico as well. I know that China and United States rarely look eye to eye in any situation. So what would you say about the world of diplomacy if the world of finance continues to shifting like that?
The interesting thing there is the traditional allies of the United States, whether that's countries that are in both NATO as well as the European Union, or countries in this part of the world like Japan and South Korea and Australia, which have security relationships with the United States. None of those countries want to jeopardize their security relationship with the United States, nor do they want to jeopardize their trading relationship. And that's why we see President Trump mixing in what up to now has historically been unrelated issues, but he's very concerned about trade deficits, as we've been discussing, but he's also concerned about the amount of money that the United States spends on defense and the much smaller amount as measured by percentage of GDP that other countries do, even though they're partners in security with the United States. We saw a lot of action and statements by President Trump in his first term on that issue, and it's clearly coming back. And President Trump is very comfortable mixing these issues. And it's not going to be a successful argument by a leader of another country to say to President Trump, you're mixing together unrelated issues, trade and security. President Trump does see these issues as very much aligned. And ultimately, he's about putting America first, which might be or might make other leaders uncomfortable. But anyone who's going to negotiate with President Trump has to realize that he's going to put America first, and he is going to mix in these various issues like trade and security and seek to get a good deal for the United States.
Well, Ross, thank you so much for sparing your time and answering my questions. Pleasure having you on air in A News.
Thank you.
Now let's continue with our news. As displays